All right, here we are with Jon Vouk. John, I've had a lot of alumni on here so far, and it seems like the main way that our alumni have got into wrestling here in Hastings is we do this thing called the clinic, and then we do the showcase. So many of them have gotten into wrestling because of the clinic and the showcase, but just had Trey Rogers on here, and he just moved to Hastings when he was a eighth grader, and you came to Hastings a little bit later too. So I know you are one of the alumni that did not get introduced to Hastings wrestling with the clinic. So let's hear about where you're from originally and then how you guys eventually moved to Hastings.
Yeah, so I'm from Watertown, Minnesota, smaller town out west, about, I don't know, hour west of the cities. It's a population of 4,000, so smaller. That town, it was double A. Got into it right away. I think from 5 years old, pretty much right away. I think as early as he could sign up, I was in it. Just my dad wrestled. I did it at first, like any kid, where it was a lot of work, a lot of time. Probably didn't appreciate it as much as I should have right away, but then later on, like really grew to love it. I'd say around like sixth grade. That's when really appreciated like the team aspects of it. And just maybe I look back on this more now, but the kind of person it made me and just, with that, of course, learning that whatever you put into something is what you get out of it, like the time in it. So I really like that. And although I think it's good for people to be multi-sport athletes, it definitely was the one like where it took the most focus, where he's been wrestling, but something that requires a lot of dedication, a lot of work in the off season. Maybe doesn't matter as much in season, but matters a lot. So I took up running to get into that. So that was my start with wrestling, I would say.
Perfect. So like you said, you grew up in Watertown, wrestled for Watertown, obviously most of your high school career, three-quarters of your high school
Mhm,
career, and then you moved to Hastings right before your senior years. Talk about how you guys got to Hastings, and then let's hear about your
mhm.
high school career. And you could talk about your high school career in Watertown and then finish it up with your high school
Yeah.
career here in Hastings.
Yeah. So kind of starting with it, with Watertown being a smaller town, it was something I was really dedicated to, where I believe I wrestled on varsity. I did one or two matches in sixth grade, but from seventh grade on, I was on varsity. Not saying I did well, but I was on varsity as it being a smaller town. I wouldn't say I really came into being a solid wrestler until I was ninth grade. As far as wrestling goes, I was like, I think even then I was probably I think it was like a 152, like coming in ninth grade. So being like a little bit larger and then a little bit younger. Yeah, I wouldn't say my record started out great, but around like ninth, 10th grade, that's when I came into my own with it. I think going on with that, where, yeah. And then eventually got to Hastings, like around 10th, 11th grade, got more solid, but my dad had a job change. So ended up moving to Hastings. That was tough and unique in a lot of different ways, but I was really fortunate. Like I even look back now with the Hastings community was super, super welcoming to me. I don't think if I had that support in that community, I overall think I had a positive experience with the move at Hastings. And yeah, without the wrestling community, I would 100% say it would have been a negative one. So that is something I really appreciate. And also it was neat coming into Hastings in the way I wanted to become a really great wrestler. And with it being a bigger program and a really solid program with a great track history, I mean, probably the stuff I learned, like the work I went through at CU, gave me multitudes better than I would have been otherwise. That was cool. With, yeah, 11th grade, I only made it to state my senior year because 11th grade, I was pretty solid, but we had a pretty strong, what it'd be section. And then also, like, I cracked a rib, like, during section finals, like, it was probably the week before the final. So it was a real ride getting through that tournament for sure. Ended up getting, what is it? Like lost in the true second final to not make it to state. But then, yeah, with that time, like then senior year with Hastings, with all the work and everything, even moving up a division, was fortunately able to make it state for the 1 year at least.
Perfect. Did we qualify as a team that year too or no?
We were one of, I think
Okay.
Farmington beat us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Couldn't remember
Was
what
it,
year that was. Okay. Yeah.
was it Farmington or? Yeah.
Yeah. We did
That's
lose to
right.
Farmington one
Yeah.
year in the finals. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bummer.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
so
I shouldn't have brought it up. God dang it. I'm
yeah.
mad at myself. No.
No, I'm more mad about the Simley one because that one ended, I think they won by one, and it was something like they had like a foul, like something, someone did something where I think like even if we tied, we would have won because of that, because they lost in some kind of, I forget what the right term is, but yeah.
Yeah.
If
And
I have a back in my day story that I'm upset about, that's the one is similar
that's
to for
one.
conference.
We've been very close a handful of times. And I think the one year you're talking about right now, I do believe Godswill had this kid on his back.
Hmm.
There was one year Croy Mater was winning with about 45 seconds left and got put to his
Hmm.
back and pin. One year Kyle Erickson was winning most of the match and got headlocked
Hmm.
with short time left. There was maybe
Yeah.
5 seconds left. I know one year Godswill Peppel had a kid on his back. As Mr. Veit said, it wasn't a pin because the ref didn't call it. so I can't say
Mm,
it was pinned. So
oh,
there's a
but it
there's a
was.
pin. Yeah, there's been a
Yeah,
handful of years we've been very close, but
yeah,
and obviously, yeah, that's the thing too. Those years we don't make it to
mhm,
state individually, or I should say as a
yeah,
team, but then we're right there with those teams in Double A, like
yeah,
Simley, or those are the
mhm,
teams too. They're placing pretty high too. So we were
yeah,
always very competitive, especially when you were there your senior year. So
mhm,
like
yeah,
you said, you end your high school career as a state qualifier. I know you also
mhm,
did cross country as well, so you're a multi-sport
mhm.
athlete in high school. So pretty cool with that. Anything else before we get on to your college, choosing college and going on to college? Anything else you want to wrap up from your high school career?
Yeah, no, I thought this was fun too. Like after wrestling, since I mostly trained off season stuff for wrestling, since I was had spring to do that, we also had that powerlifting club for that 1 year. We started that. That was fun. We just had a group of guys where like we were all pretty solid at powerlifting, and I'd
Mhm.
say we're all still keep on top of that with it. But it was something that was fun for spring, where it's something we did ourselves. So we started that little powerlifting club, and that was fun. Where there's like Keith and then Eddie, like we're
Mhm.
very strong guys, where we just had an arms race deadlift the most. And for 18-year-old at that time, I mean, we were all like right around the 500 mark, like before graduating, which was pretty fun. So that was
That's
yeah,
awesome.
the last high school sport thing that I can think of.
And like you said, kids you're still friends with to this
Mhm,
day, and then also people that have still you're really big into lifting as well, and really big
mhm.
into running as well. And those 2 guys are really into lifting, so it's something that
Oh yeah.
sparked that passion, and you guys did it as
Mhm.
a group effort here and
Yeah.
wrestled together, and then obviously continued with that the passion
Mhm.
after high school as well.
Yeah.
Pretty cool, sweet.
Yeah. It was,
You graduated from Hastings High School. Let's hear about the colleges that you were looking at, and then eventually where you went to college.
yeah, I think I always went in the idea that I would do some kind of grad school. So I was actually pretty conventional with I applied to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I felt I did well enough with my scores. I felt pretty confident I was getting in. So I looked at one, applied at this one, and that's the one I did because it's a state school that was pretty cheap. But I came with the idea. I wasn't set on medicine at that time, but I did imagine myself doing some kind of graduate program. So did something conventional and cheap. So it was nice. Went to affordable school. Also, my sister went there, so that was nice having that support built in. Where I had a little bit of distance from my parents, but wasn't too far. But then also still had some family around, so that was nice.
I know we got Ian Pebble right now at UW-Eau
Mhm.
Claire wrestling there, All American last year.
Yeah,
So just want to give a shout out to
that's
him.
awesome.
But like you said too, those Wisconsin schools, best bang for your buck. It's an hour,
Mhm.
15
Oh
minutes away
yeah,
from Hastings here.
fantastic.
And they're really right now investing
Mhm.
heavily into their sports programs too.
Mhm.
Really cool school. And as you said too,
Yeah.
you got in and had a great experience and then really
Mhm.
helped build you up for that next level as well.
Yeah, I believe Jackson Chickle is coaching
Oh, yeah.
them too.
Oh, he definitely
Yeah,
is. Yeah. I
yeah,
forgot about Jackson. He transferred in. He wrestled for 2 years at UW-Eau
Mhm.
Claire. And
Yeah,
forget about Jackson. He always likes when he gets
yeah,
the shout outs too, but he is
yeah,
on staff this year too. He did help out
yeah.
a little bit last year, I think,
Mhm.
and then he is on staff this year too. So
Yeah.
shout out to Jackson, who's
Yeah.
Polish coach right now.
'Cause high school, he was pretty much my main training partner.
Mhm.
Never forget that. So he was a big part of my, like, last year. But yeah, of course, gotta give him a shout out for that.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So you
Yeah.
graduate from Eau Claire. I know a
Mhm.
lot of times those people that try to get in med school, dentistry school, those kind of things, it's not a really straight process here. It's not a straight
Mhm.
line right in. So you gotta do a couple different things or have applications, build up that resume before you get in.
Mhm.
Obviously, you talked about going to Eau Claire and maybe medicine was in your future or you weren't quite sure. How did you what was the process like for you trying to get into med school? What else did you have to do along the line?
Mhm.
And then let's hear about the med school you chose and how the program's been so far.
Mhm. Yeah, mine definitely wasn't a straight line where I got through school, like, it took a lot of focus, a lot of work with that. Since I was, like, paying for school, I was working throughout it, so I really during that time, I just really had my head down where I was working or studying and ideally doing both at the same time. It did a lot of overnights, so I could study and work at the same time. That was nice. But with that, I reached my senior year. I was thinking about like timing and I decided I needed at least a gap year. I decided I had all this time. I don't really feel like I have a lot of life experiences since I've been in a library or at my job. And that kind of really worked out for timing where I did that, and I believe pretty much towards the tail end of my application is when the pandemic hit, where that even lined up where I ended up taking planned second gap year because at that point, like I was like, I don't really want to apply to that. I wanted to let a little bit of the transition of dealing with online schooling to blow over a little bit and get that settled. And that just worked out really fortunately for me for timing. And during that time, I also felt I need to strengthen my clinical experiences. So I was fortunate to get a clinical assistant job for a while. I do look back, I do think that was a pretty large factor in me getting accepted. where I had strong scores and everything of the. I do think that's something that makes you stand out if you like really want to strengthen an application is getting those experiences, and then also that gets you more of an opportunity to get some letters of recommendations as well. And I think those are big factors. So that's something the timing really worked out. But I was also like fortunate during remote years, COVID. I also got into biocompatibility for medical devices. I had some passion for material science, chemistry in general, and I was able to work a remote job with that. And that really got me interested in medical device side of medicine. I think there's a lot of fantastic applications with technology. I think that's like a big thing of being able to utilize those devices for improving patient outcomes. So I had, yeah, very fortunate experience to be able to work with that for a little bit prior to getting accepted. And then also got a little bit of time just kind of kick back a little bit. I was just like, I'm not saying just working like a 40-hour week, but working like a pretty regular job. And then also have some time to hang out with friends and everything like that during that time before really getting on the grindstone of medical school. But
Perfect.
yeah, do you want to hear more about the actual application process?
Yeah, if you want to talk about that as well, I know that could be a cumbersome process. We
Mhm,
just did one with Trey and he was talking about like 20, 30-page applications and multiple
mhm,
different schools. And then I know you're on waiting list for some schools and then you're
mhm.
accepting, yeah, maybe soft acceptances to
Yeah.
some places and follow-up applications and follow-up interviews. So I know it's
Mhm.
quite the daunting process.
Initially, yeah, applying for schools, it is quite a hassle where it is this constant mental battle too of you're just like, what am I doing here? This is crazy. This is a lot. And like, or I forget if it's like the initial or the secondary that like it is financially cumbersome as well, where if you want to cast a wide net, it can cost you quite a bit. It's usually around $100 an application. And I've heard people and they apply to 35 schools. And I'm just like, that's 3,500 right there. And that's just crazy.
Yeah.
And we kind of have the mentality of within med school that ends up being a drop in the bucket as far as like the long-term goal. But because that is a big thing. If you are committing to this, is just understanding that it is a long term game. You're definitely a little bit of delayed gratification, and being able to deal with that during that time. Yeah, I think being able to figure out that mentality is pretty huge because it's not, yeah, far from an instant gratification process.
But
It's
very
really
similar
keep
to wrestling, you would say, right? You
yeah,
talked about that maybe a little bit ago, but I would say that's a wrestling practice or that's a
yeah,
wrestling mentality right there too, where you're on the grind. You got to have the
mhm,
grit. You got to have a short memory when it comes to this. You got to have
mhm,
that perseverance. And that's all
yeah.
stuff we teach right there in the wrestling room.
Yeah, where it's even, yeah, comparing to like Aussiism work and that, where it's like the little things, what you do in the dark, in quiet is what ends up showing in the end. And just understanding not, there are going to be ideally a lot of wins, but they're not all going to be celebrated wins. The ones you got to acknowledge yourself and leave it at that and be aware of that within the process for sure. But yeah, I was pretty fortunate with since I took the 2 years off where I had the 1 year where I was thinking about it. So I had pretty much everything lined up, the schools. And then the second year when I applied, I kept it pretty light on the amount of schools I went to because I felt pretty confident with my scores and which ones I was looking at and which ones I realistically want to actually attend. And I was very fortunate to get one of the earlier waves, realistically, the earliest wave of like interviews with U of M within the cycle. And then also I got acceptance. I think I mean, it would have been before Halloween even, which within most of the time, if you get it before December, like January, that's already considered a pretty early acceptance. So I was pretty lucky. Like I had that time locked in, and that's why I was able to really focus on that medical device career. Yeah, that one. I mean, I think I'm pretty lucky with that. Like they just had an early wave and like just worked out with that because I got two other acceptances, but it was nice being in state school. I think that should get talked about more is the favoritism of in state or like a state that's reciprocal with it, where they have reciprocity because huge on finances and huge on acceptance rates because the state school, I don't think that was something unfortunately was not like told to me even during my undergrad process. So that's something looking at it, you do have to be picky about your schools and also look at the realistic aspect of going to a private that's going to be much more expensive or going to a state school that will favor in-state students.
Perfect.
So,
So you're at U of M right now. What I think Trey was saying it's a 4-year process or it's a
mhm,
6-year process. Can't remember
sure.
which one. A 4-year process. Okay. And so let's hear about where you're at in the process and then preview a little bit too where you're leaning about where you want to go in medicine in the future.
Yeah. So with it being a 4-year process, a good way to explain how most programs work is it's 2 years didactic where I would say in funny ways, 2 years of nerdy stuff and then 2 years of actual hospital stuff. So it starts out where it's the book learning, you take step 1, and then after that or around the same time, then you start like in rotation where you're getting hands-on experiences with patients. And yeah, with timing of I had some like crazy life events where something got pushed back. So I'd say I'm probably considered like early within my 3rd year within the entire process, but had a little bit of space. It long time to explain, but it's like everything's on track, but it's a little bit delayed with some of the things. But so finish with the didactic portion where a lot of that is school learning. And then, yeah, sorry, like I've done a handful of rotations. So have been, yeah, pediatrics and an OB-GYN rotation as well.
Sweet. Anything that really sticks out to where you want to go in the future?
I'm more and more leaning towards IM or emergency medicine. I think I would like something a little bit more generalized where you get to see a lot of stuff. Before, I really thought I'd be someone who would enjoy a specialized practice, but even with my previous experience of working with medical devices, I do think I want a more flexible career where the specialized ones, it's you really have to think you're probably one of the top like 200 people in the nation that know that specific knowledge and like that creates like a very high demand on your time or like being IM very important, like internal medicine or family medicine, very important things, but it does allow for a little bit more flexibility of how your practice can operate. And I think I'm leaning towards that where initially I was definitely someone like I would say with wrestling or like even early school years where I was just very like on the grind someone and on the grind of wanting to just like really focus on this. And I will say as I'm getting older, lifestyle matters more and more, where it's like also being able to devote time to that, where I'm grateful for my past self for putting in the work to lay the like groundwork for this, but I am more focused thinking about, hey, of course, this stuff is really important. And like, it's cool being in a field where it's really meaningful. Like you're hopefully making a lot of positive impact on people's lives, but you also still have a life outside that too. I'm trying to make sure you can pay attention to that.
Well, sweet. I got one question left, but anything else then
Mhm.
before we get on to the last question, John? We talked about your high school career. We talked about early college too. We talked about med school and where you're at right now in med school. Anything else to wrap up between those three things before we get to our last question?
Yeah, nothing comes to mind. No.
Okay. So the last thing I always ask then too is just lessons from wrestling that you have
Mhm.
learned and applied to your life. So you've already talked about a few different things, that grit, that perseverance through the medical application process. I can only
Mhm.
imagine how much of a grind that is too, for sure. So think about your time at Watertown, your time at Hastings,
Mhm.
some lessons that you learned from wrestling that
Mhm.
have really been impactful in your life.
I think a big thing is I look back and I wish someone told me this more often too is really like with your coaches. And if it's like people you trust coaches or like even or medical school, like faculty, anything like that, I think really trusting the process more of these people have seen so many people go through it. This is your first time going through it. And maybe even having the personality that a lot of grit, like there is probably an aspect of being a very stubborn person too, and that's can be applied. But at the same time, having the humility to listen to your coaches, listen to people who've seen it a lot, and like trust that process. Of course, choose your mentors wisely. I think that's obviously huge. But once like you have someone you can trust and like they have a successful track record, just putting that trust and in some ways turning your brain off and just like trusting that process. I think is huge in a lot of areas in life where, especially with this type of thing, they've seen hundreds, if not thousands of people go through like whatever process they're trying to achieve. They probably know more than you.
Mhm.
And like, it's just
Yeah.
to listen to that. And I think that's important where once you sit to complain about little things of, oh, why are we doing this? Whatever. Like maybe there's a specific workout you hate in wrestling, or there's some lesson like where it's like, this doesn't make sense in med school or something where it's like, they've sent like thousands upon thousands of like successful people on their way. So just listening to that and trusting the process.
Perfect. I was going to ask follow up if you could think of one. I know I'm putting you on the spot with it then, but do you have a specific story or something in your life that you can really look back and be like, man, this one time I should have
Mhm.
trusted the process and I did it, or the
Mhm.
opposite. I was going into this, had no idea what I was
Mhm.
doing, found a good quality adult, faculty member, coach, really trusted what they were
Yeah.
going to say, and it worked out really
Yeah.
well. Or even just a person, if you want to give a shout out to a person or a
Mhm.
coach that really exemplifies that as well, that you can always look back on and trust their opinion. So any of those
Yeah.
three ways, if you want to take the question.
Yeah. I guess I do have a specific memory with wrestling that I think about where I try to hold myself accountable to this, where Like I said, with wrestling, I started wrestling in the varsity practice pretty young, but then one day I think it was like high school had a field trip or something. So like I wrestled with the middle school like room to that practice. And at that point, like I was pretty confident, was doing well and everything, but I was definitely like sandbagging, being lazy. But I was like
Mhm.
in my head, I'm like, I'm still winning, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a coach, like he came up, he said, that's horse crap. Like where he's just like, you can do better. Like where it's I don't care that you're winning. Like you can do better. And I try to think about that where it's not always about specific metrics. It's about knowing like you gave it your all and you're doing your best. I think that's really important. As something where I would say like in life, like getting older, like where it's easy going autopilot on a lot of things, but I think having that conscious like intent of being, I'm doing my best in this moment. I think it's huge. I think it's even, what is it? I can't think of the author's name, but it's one of, am I doing the best thing in this moment that I possibly can do? Of course, don't take that overboard. Sometimes like resting is the best thing you can do, but trying to have that conscious thought about a lot of things, I think can lead to a lot of success in life.
I like that example that you gave too, because from a coaching perspective, I think just that one specific story that you told could be applied to many different areas of our life too.
Mhm,
You are at that time, you were in the varsity room and you got brought down just for that one
mhm,
day to the middle school room.
mhm,
And as a coach, they probably see you as this older kid that can be a great role
mhm,
model, right?
mhm,
And this is John, and he's wrestling with the high school, and he's coming into the middle
mhm.
school room, and you're probably not doing the best job, and you're maybe not taking this seriously.
Yeah,
So this coach
I
probably
wasn't. Yeah.
sees you. Yeah, exactly. This coach sees
Mhm,
you, this leader and this model, and not living up to the standard. And then you just had to
mhm,
get a wake up call and you stepped up to the plate here
mhm,
on that one. And I feel like that specific example could be applied to many different aspects of our life.
mhm,
Thinking about here with trust the process, where you can be a leader and you can be looked up to, but sometimes we don't really know when our leadership is going
mhm,
to be put on display, or we don't know when that's going
mhm.
to happen. And we should just probably do that all the time. Constantly be
Yeah.
that leader, constantly be that role model to other people. And like you said too, the other side of that could be true where you now are the respected person and you are now the one with the knowledge and to go out and seek those opportunities to help
Mhm,
those other people. So I think you could take that trusted process and the story you told in a lot of different ways. So I really like that
mhm.
story a lot.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. I think like pivotal moment in my life of just having that frame. Do your best. Like things will go better most of the time.
For sure. John, that's all the questions I got for you. The last thing we always do here is just turn the microphone over to our guest. So any other shout outs you want to give, anything any questions I didn't ask you that you want to answer, anything else you want to get off your chest, like I said, the microphone is yours and you can go for it.
I'm hoping some amazing life changing advice will dawn upon me, but too much right. Yeah, with medicine, like it's a really great thing and it takes a lot of time, but it is something like you definitely have to make sure you're going to be devoted to. And I think even when choosing like your path in life, cool, it's cool having the accolades or the whatever status you want to say with it, but it requires a lot of dedication and like devotion. And even if that's not your specific calling, just even trying to make sure whatever you do, you end up having that dedication and devotion to, I think matters more than trying to focus on trying to get whatever status or something like that. It's not a little like checkbox, anything like that. Oh, cool. Like I did this. Like really try to make sure you're giving it all. Where I think, yeah, even going back to wrestling, I remember at state with like McClay, like he had a talk with it where he's like, a lot of people are happy they made it to the big dance, like that's cool, and then they check out. Where he's like, don't be that person. Like you like give it your all. Like you
Mhm.
go this work to get here. Where it's like make sure it's like something you're devoted, dedicated to, and gonna give it your all. So yeah, I remember that from McClay too. So I think that's good. Where like yeah, whatever you do, don't just check out. Make sure it's something you're passionate about.
Perfect. Thanks, John.
Yeah, yeah.